completely fucked up.
Wow, it has been a long time, and I really have to apologize for that. It's been nearly 4 months since my last video, and the long gap in between is because of a whole bunch of reasons relating to work and vacations, and most importantly probably my audio. I've gone through 3 or 4 studio mics now, and all of them have a hiss, so if you're an expert, please help me out. Right now I'm using just my DSLR with an actual microphone attached to it, and it sounded a little bit better than all of these studio mics I've been getting that I've been plugging into my computer. All of them have sucked. Anyways, moving on, guys. I've seen a lot of people making these how I got red pilled videos on YouTube, and they're getting a lot of attention. So to basically revamp my channel and kind of formally come back and start making videos again, I wanted to share my own red pill video, because mine's a lot different from all the young people these days that are being red pilled, or older people. But nonetheless, the majority of people these days are being red pilled because they're realizing that cultural Marxism, which is taking over our society, is insane. It's basically emotions are more important than facts, and it's the regressive left. It's, you know, all of a sudden they want to segregate people again with their safe spaces, excluding especially white males, of course. And I have a lot of experience with this, which maybe I'll share in another video someday, but in a nutshell, I went to San Francisco State University, and my biggest complaint was that they had a cornucopia of clubs. However, the vast majority of them were ethnocentric to a specific race. And none of them were white, of course, because that would be racist. And it's funny, actually, I did in fact see a YouTube video from another person that went to the same school as me, and she had roughly the same experience, which was if you want to join a club that is diverse and fun, why can't you join one that doesn't seem to have either Greek life or a specific race attached to it? So her main complaint was either you have to go into a sorority or a fraternity in my case, or you go into a specific racial club. And does no one see the racism in that? That is segregation already in the universities, and they breed this stuff into us in a way that seems okay, but in reality it's really not. It's just preparing you for more racism down the line. I want to make so many videos on this, and I'll be honest and say I've already filmed probably 4 or 5 videos on this real racism and how it's coming to power in our country, and it will metastasize, if you will, and how we need to combat it, basically. But nonetheless, this video is about my red pilling. Unlike most people, again, it has nothing to do with cultural Marxism. It had to do with me having went and lived in another country for about 5 months, 6 months. And when I got back, I was getting back to school and work, and just something was off. And I finally was able to realize it quite easily, because the other culture I'd lived in was so very different. And I'll just tell you, I was living in Russia, believe it or not, but I'm not some... I actually have a fear of saying that these days, just because the mainstream media seems so powerful that they might actually somehow find me someday and be like, this guy's a Russian spy. Look, he lived in another country. He lived in Russia. Anyways, yeah, that's complete nonsense and BS. And I've made numerous videos about the complete BS that the entire Russian hack really is. Okay, so I get back to the States and something seems off, kind of bothering me, you know, in the background, and I'm kind of just digging around the internet regularly trying to figure things out. And I was 11 years old when September 11th happened, 2001. I was 11 years old. And I'll never forget that day. I woke up to my father running down the hallway of my house on the second story, yelling, "America's under attack, America's under attack." And I mean, my dad's a very kind of a quiet, logical guy, very logical, and it's rubbed off on me. And so I immediately knew something was very wrong, and I was scared that we had been nuked or something, because my dad wouldn't typically do that unless something really bad has happened. So anyways, go downstairs, watch the TV. There it is, September 11th. All of us, I mean, like literally probably 99.9% of the population on that particular day, probably over 99.9%, believed exactly what they're seeing because it's on TV. And it took until I was about 20 years old, maybe 21, when I was scouring the internet and I found a video called Zeitgeist. It was hours long, like 3 hours long, and parts of it were completely unrelated, but the most important part, I think, was chapter 3, and it was entirely about 9/11, the inside job. And for me, this was quite literally almost a come to Christ moment, and I think if you listen to me now and hear me out and follow some simple instructions of how you can come to the same realization, you too will come to a new realization that I have come to. And it is so it is so profound that you might have a serious problem believing what you see. So Zeitgeist was one of the first videos ever made, basically gathering as much information as they could to depict to their viewers just how much overwhelming obvious evidence exists for the inside job of 9/11. And when you are an American, we have a lot of kind of ingrained patriotism and belief in our government and our people as being morally superior to Russians, at least, and Germans, definitely. Nonetheless, watching the video got really heavy really fast. And it will for you too if you don't already know that 9/11 was an inside job. I feel in my heart that I feel like roughly 60% of the population at this point should know or does know that 9/11 was an inside job, but I'm not sure. And I don't think you can even take a poll of that without getting in some trouble or something, but I would really like to know how many people still believe that 9/11 was an attack from terrorists, did they ever even tell us where the attackers were from? They said later, way later, that they're actually from Saudi Arabia, and yet where did we go into? Afghanistan. Now, I've already shared a video pertaining to the general that was at one point told that we, for some weird reason, we're going to go into Afghanistan, we're going to go into Iraq, Iran, Syria, Lebanon, and a number of other countries, I think including Yemen potentially, but nonetheless, Libya as well. But all of these countries don't have a central bank yet. That's what they all have in common. And being as red-pilled as I hope you already are, but if not, the one thing they all have in common is without a central banking entity that is unrelated to the government, the Rothschilds and the global elites cannot basically enslave those people. So those people in one way, at least one way, are free from that kind of tyranny. But central banks that don't actually have the strings of the government lashed into them, such as the American, I call it the American, but it is called the Federal Reserve, but it is in no way controlled by the US federal government. And they do control the money and the creation of money, and by doing so they can artificially and scientifically create hyperinflation as well as depressions, basically. Basically, they have control over our economy. I have to apologize. I have a way of beating around the bush and saving the juicy stuff for last, but I'm going to get to it. Basically, I ask you to now watch not Zeitgeist, because it is old and kind of outdated and it beats around the bush as well. But what you can watch is a video called Loose Change, as well as several others, but I don't want to overload you. So Loose Change is the only one I want you to watch. Watch that documentary. It should probably blow your mind. And for me personally, until you've come to the true realization and actually believe it and understand full well that the US government did in fact have a great hand in play on the day of 9/11, it might make you weep. It made me weep. I don't cry very often, but it made me cry that day. And I realized that the government is not a bunch of people like you and me. They are elitists that have an agenda that they see as way more important than your life. In fact, we, and especially soldiers in the U.S. Army and armed forces, are in fact slaves and pawns for the elites. And they do see that way. Just think about Henry Kissinger said that himself. And Henry Kissinger has had so many high offices within the U.S. federal government that it'll blow your mind. But nonetheless, he called soldiers merely pawns for the elites to play with, basically. I'm paraphrasing. But after coming to that realization, I shared it with one of my best friends who watched it. I'm talking about Zeitgeist again, back in the day. And the same thing for him. He says, dude, thank you for sharing that with me. I'm not gonna lie. I need some time to process this, because that made me cry, because I think there's overwhelming obvious evidence that the US federal government perpetrated the 9/11 attack against its own people so that it would have the ability to make up a fake war called the War on Terror and have the moral right of way to start wars with basically any government that are harboring terrorists. Now, this has a lot, and I mean, it has absolutely everything to do with what's going on today with ISIS. Because, in case you didn't know, the US government and Israel work together to run ISIS for a number of reasons. One being that it helps maintain a terrorist force that will not just disappear overnight, because we have done so well with the US government with the U.S. Armed Forces that we have annihilated the terrorist threat in so many of these different countries that there really isn't a formidable opponent to the point where we had to start helping them. You might recall U.S. Officials complaining about the fact that we left behind, I believe, 380 to 400 Humvees, and we left them to ISIS. Like, everyone should know this. Like, we do that, and yet we act like, oh, we left it behind because putting them back on planes or trains or boats is too expensive, so we just left them out there because we're the U.S. fucking Army and we've got all the money in the world, right? No, we're wrong. We did that for a purpose, and that is to help ISIS, because we are airdropping ISIS supplies all the time to this day. You can find generals in the Syrian armed forces as well as the Iraq and Iranian armed forces saying literally, like, man, ISIS is really weak. We would annihilate them in like a few days if it wasn't for the US dropping them resources all the time. Like, they will show you boxes, literally boxes of supplies, and the boxes literally say US Army on them, or like USA, or made in the USA, all of that. And you can just Google these videos. I mean, I'm not making anything up. I'm just super aware because I've been looking into this stuff for years compared to some people that are waking up right now, only because our culture is schisming and tearing apart at the seams, basically, because cultural Marxism is just infested our country. And socialism and the communist agenda is at the root of all of this. All of it. It's all connected. Trust me. And if you want to help yourself really understand all of this, not only do I invite you to watch Loose Change, but I invite you to read a book that I've read, I think, 3 times on Audible. And I love it because it's actually a very concise book. They just share some really strong points. I think it was written about 30 something years ago, so right before I was born, but all of the evidence in that book is absolutely relevant today, and it'll be relevant for years and years and years to come, because it'll show you just how the US government will play Democrats and Republicans against each other as though they're stark opponents, when in reality, the higher up elites of both parties are best friends. Why is that? Because they have the same agenda, a communist one. In the book, I haven't even said the name. I'm so sorry. I have a real problem beating around the bush. It's called None Dare Call It Conspiracy. It is amazing. I'm going to drop a link to it down in the description, because you can get a free version of it on Amazon if you haven't bought anything on Amazon before. So if it's your first book, it'll be free. And I literally encourage you to listen to that book a minimum of 3 times. I'm going to listen to it another 1 or 2 times probably, just because the information in that book is so profound and helpful for you to understand today's power plays in politics, basically. And it'll also help you understand false flag events. False flag events are things like 9/11, where they are perpetrated by the same government that acts reactionary to the event. So in other words, 9/11 happens and the US government reacts and says, we're going to start the war on terror and do XYZ. So that's a false flag event. Other false flag events that you should know about are the sinking of the Lusitania to go into World War I, Pearl Harbor to go into World War II, as well as the sinking of the Maine to go into the Spanish-American War, as well as a large number of other things. But if you doubt that the government does this, trust me, just look up Project Northwoods. Operation Northwoods by the U.S. Armed Forces was quite literally the permission of the US government to use any means necessary to shape public opinion within the United States. So they were prepared to blow up movie theaters and fly drone aircrafts and destroy them, and basically paint a picture of, wow, terrorists did XYZ, or keep in mind, terrorists can be from anywhere, not just Islam, but also from other governments, for example. So you could say Russian terrorists, native Russians living within the United States, like sleeper cell stuff, did XYZ. This gives us the moral high ground and permission to go do this. So these events have literally changed history drastically. Once you come to this realization, you're going to sink your teeth into so much more information and have a real thirst for knowledge. And I hope to be a place where you can feel comfortable coming to and looking for more information, because let's face it, people like Alex Jones are kind of the tip of the spearhead for this movement of an awakening to just reality, really. However, Alex Jones and people like myself sometimes come off a little too woke. They know too much for the average person to believe. And that's a big worry I have a lot of the time, is if I start spewing information, really start talking without any barriers to what I'm willing to talk about, I might literally scare people away, because I feel that I do know a little bit too much information. But here on Destination Truth, I want to promise you one thing. I will not spew information that I have not verified with multiple sources. So although I love things like UFOs, I do believe UFOs are not necessarily extraterrestrials. I think there's just as much evidence saying that they might actually be US Air Force secret projects. Anyways, there's so much interesting things in our universe that we have to learn about, and that's what Destination Truth is all about. So thank you for coming to my channel. If this is your first time here, please give me a like and subscribe, because I really want to see if anyone likes listening to me, so I can keep going forward with more videos. Otherwise, I might permanently close up shop. I don't know. It's a lot less stressful to just not have a need to make videos to educate the people. But I really enjoy doing it. I just love sharing information. I'm an Aquarius. It's something I'm supposed to like doing, I guess. But I feel there's so much ignorance in our generation about history, true history, real history, and how global bankers have been writing our world history for too long to be going without mention. Basically, they've purposely kept themselves out of the history books, when in reality they're writing those history books, and they have perpetrated more actual global events that help shape politics and governments more than any other entity in history. Namely, if I'm gonna just point out one thing in one direction to say, do your research on the Rothschild family, that's where you should go first. The Rothschilds single-handedly have more control over this planet than any other family or emperor or government ever in history. I could just go on forever and ever, guys. I love talking about this stuff. I'm gonna make more videos soon, so please, again, give me a like and subscribe, and please leave a message. I will read as many of them as I can for the first 2 weeks after I make this video, because I want to see what your opinions are, and I want to make better content. And yeah, thanks for coming, guys. Destination Truth out.
I'm just getting warmed up. This is Von Clausewitz shit. Total fucking war. I'm gonna pull the whole thing down. I'm gonna bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head. It's gonna be biblical.